Hey everyone, my name is Trey Yingst. I'm the chief foreign correspondent for Fox News, and we're reporting right now from Tel Aviv in the Middle East, covering the unfolding situation on the ground in Iran, gathering more information on these demonstrations that continue to erupt across the country. Many of the protests focused on the Iranian capital of Tehran, but there are a number of other locations. So we aim today to answer many of the questions that you may have following our reporting over the weekend and what you may have seen on Fox News and online as we continue to cover this developing story. Just to give you a bit of background about how all of this began, just over 2 weeks ago, there was a strike in the Grand Bazaar in the Iranian capital of Tehran. Frustration over the poor economic situation, the weak currency, and the living conditions for people across Iran. What we know now is that those protests have expanded into broader anti-government demonstrations, and Iranian security forces have cracked down on these demonstrations heavily, not only in Tehran, but in other major cities like Mashhad. And it's been very difficult to gather details about what's unfolding because of the internet blackout. Iranian authorities have cut the internet and phone lines, so people have to use Starlink terminals to get information out to the world. We'll go through how we're getting information on the ground in Iran and also what we know the latest information is. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments below, whether you're joining on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, or any other platform. And I'll start by answering a few of the questions that have been put in the comments below. And then we'll get into some of the details again about how we're gathering information so we can report out the latest on Fox News. The information that we have today is that there are actually pro-government demonstrations across the Iranian capital of Tehran. Iranian officials, including President Masoud Pezeshkian and the country's supreme leader, have called on their supporters to go to the streets as sort of a counter-demonstration. But we heard new comments yesterday from President Trump indicating that the options remain on the table for any sort of possible responses by the United States. My producer is going to send to me a number of questions that you may have regarding the situation on the ground in Iran from the comments, and I will answer those below whenever I get some of those questions coming in. So just stand by 1 second and we will have some more questions answered. In terms of what's happening on the ground, one question people ask in the comments that I see, is there a number of confirmed deaths yet? And so we know that according to human rights organizations, over 544 people have been confirmed killed. Security forces opened firing on some crowds of people, not just in Tehran, but in other major cities. And we do expect that number to rise significantly. You may have seen some of the reports last night indicating that thousands could have been killed. It's very challenging, again, to confirm the specific number as it relates to these demonstrations and the response from security forces. But again, the number that we are using today is just over 540 people. But we do expect that number to rise as more bodies are counted. We've also seen images from morgues in the Iranian capital of Tehran indicating that many people were killed by live ammunition. Another question that we have, will President Trump take action and help people? So this is a very challenging question to answer. We've heard from the president again yesterday on Air Force One. He spoke about these widespread demonstrations and he made some news saying that the Iranians actually reached out to the Americans requesting a meeting. We're not sure if the White House will take that meeting, but certainly there are channels of communication, and the Iranians clearly have seen the comments from President Trump on Truth Social and in the media over the concerns that he has regarding the images out of Iran and the killing of demonstrators. Additionally, we expect that the United States will ultimately be able to move forward in a way that will be a combination of preparedness and diplomacy. When you look at the situation on the ground, the Americans are taking in a lot of factors, not only what their allies in Europe are saying, but also these back channels of diplomacy that they're able to use. I want to move on to the next question here. When will the internet be restored? We heard today from Iran's foreign minister, who spoke about the possibility of internet being restored in Iran. When that happens, we do expect to get more information on the ground out of these protests. Remember, it's very challenging to confirm numbers and information. A lot of the videos that are being projected to the world are coming through people who go to the demonstrations with cell phones, and then if they have a personal Starlink terminal, they're able to get that information out to the world. Yesterday, I was able to connect with one individual in Tehran who was using a personal Starlink, who gave some new information about what these demonstrations have looked like. He described having to pull people away from what is basically a front line between the demonstrators and security forces. And when people were wounded, they would be dragged to the back and then ultimately taken to local hospitals. The next question has to do with the international community and their support for the Iranian people. The question is, does the international community have any idea of how to help the Iranian people? And the reality is that it's very challenging. Iran is a big country of about 90 million people, and the situation is very different depending on where people are located. I also spoke over the phone yesterday with someone on the ground in western Iran, just close to the Iraqi border, who said that in his specific area, there were very few demonstrations, but in some of the larger population centers of Kurdish Iranian areas in the western part of Iran, there were serious demonstrations, and some people had even traveled to Tehran, the Iranian capital. The next question is, where have the protests been most active? And the answer to that is in the big cities. The largest city of Tehran, the Iranian capital, also Mashhad, Iran's second largest city. And again, these are very densely populated areas. And one source that I spoke with yesterday in Tehran said that while many people were coming to the streets, there were some areas, some sectors of the city, he described, where people were too afraid to come out. They saw what happened, not only with the shooting of demonstrators, but also the arrests. There have been mass arrests in Iran, thousands of people being taken by security forces and put in jails and prisons. And that's another major concern for people who are going to the streets, that they could be jailed for an indefinite amount of time. And so that's certainly a concern. Someone says, how does this compare to the last revolution? The comparison that I've seen has been more recent history as it relates to the women's rights demonstrations a few years ago in Iran. And in some cities, the demonstrations have actually been smaller, I'm told. But of course, these clashes are very intense and people are being killed at a very high level. And that is why there is such attention from the United States. And you'll see as we continue to cover this story on Fox News. And I encourage you to watch all of our coverage on Fox News, to follow us across social media platforms, to get a real understanding of the images and what it looks like on the ground. These are significant clashes with tens of thousands of people in the streets. Someone says, is there any information on the people who were injured and hospitalized? Again, it's very challenging to get new information out of Iran. But as we continue to gather confirmed information, we will get it to you not only here on social media platforms, but also on Fox News channel and our website, foxnews.com. If you're just tuning in now on social media platforms, first of all, I'd encourage you to share this video with your audience and to follow Fox News and my account at Trey Yingst. My name is Trey Yingst. I'm the chief foreign correspondent for Fox, and I'm currently reporting on the ground in the Middle East from our bureau here. As we continue to follow this story on the ground out of Iran, I want to just, again, recap what we know if you're just now tuning in. For the past 2 weeks, Iranians have taken to the streets of their country. They've been demonstrating initially over poor living conditions, a weak currency, and also economic conditions across the country. These have turned into broader anti-government demonstrations, and security forces in Iran have cracked down on the protests, not only arresting thousands of people, but also using live ammunition against demonstrators, killing what we can confirm, according to human rights organizations, is more than 540 people. And again, as this story develops, we anticipate it will change, and we'll be able to get more information, not only from our intelligence sources around the world, but also from the ground, as officials there eventually are able to restore the internet. Right now, there is still an internet blackout 4 days straight, and it's very challenging to get information. You have to rely on the small pieces of video and photos that are being released through Starlink terminals. And again, I'm going to look at some of the questions here that we're getting in from the comments. And one of the questions is, has Iran reacted to President Trump's warning that he is taking very strong action against them? We've heard from some Iranian officials who were in the streets of Tehran at that pro-government rally today, and some of them were not taking President Trump's comments seriously. They were brushing them off as comments and threats. When we look at the government in Iran, though, it is, like any country in the world, a spectrum of different people. And when we look at the parliament yesterday, Iran's parliament speaker was actually threatening the United States, saying that if there are Israeli or American strikes against Iran, because again, the concern here is that this could lead to some sort of response that is a military action by the United States or its allies. And the Speaker of the Parliament said that if those strikes take place, Iran would target U.S. bases and Israel in response. And some lawmakers there in the Iranian Parliament were actually chanting "Death to America" during the session that took place yesterday. I want to take you back to the war that took place in the Middle East just last year in June, that 12-day war. We were on the ground here in Israel as Iranian ballistic missiles were hitting a variety of locations across this country, and the Israelis were launching airstrikes against Iran. The concern is that another war could erupt. Despite the fact that the United States conducted airstrikes to destroy Iran's nuclear program, the country still has an extensive ballistic missile program, and they're able to target major population centers in Israel and also across the Middle East. Remember, there are U.S. bases in a variety of countries. And so that is part of the concern here. Another question that we are getting has to do with access to food and water supplies for Iranians that are protesting. One source that I spoke with in Tehran yesterday via Starlink said that 90% of shops are closed. There is a broader water issue, and we won't get into that during this stream today, but a water access issue for people in Tehran. And that was an issue before these demonstrations started. And so there are a variety of social and economic problems that the Iranian people are facing, and that's part of the frustration that they have expressed. We've heard from Iranians before these demonstrations started about frustration with their government supporting proxies across the region, like the Houthis in Yemen or Hezbollah in Lebanon, or these Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias. Also, a number of factions across the Middle East. And so there's concern here about the focus for the Iranian people. And again, we do expect to get more information on the ground in Iran as internet access is eventually restored. We do expect also more protests to take place as day 15 of these anti-government demonstrations is underway. So again, I'm going to recap here before we end. My name is Trey Yingst. I'm the chief foreign correspondent for Fox News. I'd encourage you to share this video and of course tune in to our coverage on Fox as these demonstrations continue. But again, the latest information that we have, these anti-government demonstrations are continuing. Today there were pro-government demonstrations organized by the Iranian government in the capital of Tehran. We know that hundreds, if not thousands of people have been killed, many wounded and arrested as these demonstrations continue. But again, thank you for tuning in here across our social media platforms, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. We continue to cover this story also on X and of course on Fox News Channel. So be sure to follow us across all social media platforms. And thanks again for tuning in.